Wednesday, and this is what we do every single Wednesday. Orion and I, we read. I want you to know, Orion, there are two stories, and I'm holding up one, The Little House by Virginia Lee Burton, and this one has no animals in it. There aren't big carnivores in it. You're happy about that, but there also aren't any other animals in it. But it is a good follow-up to last week's book, because this book talks a little bit about urban sprawl. And urban sprawl, well, if you remember from last week, that's when the city moves out and further out and further out. And in this case, well, you'll see what's going to happen in this story. I'll be right back to it, but I want to show you the second story. The second story I'm going to read to you is called The Giving Tree. It's by Shel Silverstein. Why am I reading you The Giving Tree? One of you asked for it. There was a viewer, it's a couple months now, back. I ordered the book. I now have it in, and the person asked, could you read The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein? And you know what? If you request it, I'll do my very best to find it, and then we will read it on a Wednesday. What's that, Orion? Oh, if somebody requests a book about a big carnivore, would I still read it? I'll tell you what. Orion and I will always screen the books, so we will always look to see, is this a good book to be reading on a 3:30 Wednesday? Okay, if it has big carnivores, maybe we'll just say, nope, not reading that one. I'm back to this one, and I want to tell you, before I read it, that there's a page that probably tells you more about this book than any way I could go and describe it. The page I'm going to show you comes from, well, it's right towards the end of the book, but not quite all the way to the ending. And it's just before that one right there. It's this one. So I've spent most of my life living in small towns or small cities, ones that are 10,000 people or less. In fact, I lived for about 20 years in a town of about 1,000 people. And this scene in this book wasn't one that I experienced very often until, yes, I took a trip to New York City. That felt like this picture in this book. And yes, I've been to Chicago a number of times and some other cities. And this picture reminds me of how I felt when I was in Chicago trying to see the stars. That's what the little house is doing in this picture right here. He's looking up going, I can't see the stars. I can't see the moon. And it's because of those tall buildings that are in the way. And so that's really what this book is about. I want to show you one more picture. And the reason I'm showing you this one, even though it's a little hard to see, I imagine, over our different streams, but this book spends some time letting something appear way in the background. So if you looked way in the background over here, you see way there on the horizon, you can see that something is headed that way. And that's how this story gets carried out. Now, I won't be able to show you that on every page. So if you wanted to go get The Little House, I'll get it back to the library as quickly as I can. And you can go and look at those pictures yourself. This is The Little House by Virginia Lee Burton. Hope you enjoyed a lot, Orion, and hope you do too, you people that are tuning in to listen to today's reading. So, The Little House by Virginia Lee Burton. Let's just move a little bit, okay? So that we can get right on screen for the book. Here we go. Once upon a time. Yep, I'm going to move a little bit again because we're not quite right yet. There we go. Once upon a time, there was, Ryan, do you want a little? There you go. You're on camera too. I'll start again. Once upon a time, there was a little house way out in the country. She was a pretty little house. She was strong and well built. The man who had built her so well said, "This little house shall never be sold for gold or silver, and she will live to see our great-great-grandchildren's great-great-grandchildren living in her." The little house was very happy. She sat on the hill, and she watched the countryside around her. She watched the sun rise in the morning. She watched the sun set in the evening. Day followed day, each one a little different from one before. But the little house stayed just the same. In the nights she watched the moon grow from a thin little moon to a full moon, then back again to a thin old moon. And when there was no moon, she watched the stars, way off in the distance. Way off in the distance, she could see the lights of the city. The little house was curious about the city and wondered what it would be like to live there. Time passed quickly. Hey, I get to take off my mask. I'm the only one up here right now in the Science Center, so I'll take that off. Time passed quickly for the little house as she watched the countryside slowly change with the seasons. In the spring, when the days grew longer and the sun warmer, she waited for the first robin to return from the south. She watched the grass turn green. She watched the buds of the trees swell and the apple trees burst into blossom. Well, that's kind of an interesting thing to watch too in this book because the trees change during the entire book. She watched the children playing in the brook. So there's the brook. That's another thing that you can watch for in this book is how the brook and the pond change over time. In the long summer days, she sat in the sun and watched the trees cover themselves with leaves and the white daisies cover the hill. She watched the gardens grow and she watched the apples turn red and ripen. She watched the children swimming in the pool. So there's the pool. That's another thing to watch for in this book. In the fall, when the days grew shorter and the nights colder, she watched the first frost turn the leaves to bright yellow and orange and red. She watched the harvest gathered and the apples picked. She watched the children going back to school. Yes, this book was written about a time that's about 100 years ago. So yes, there are horses pulling wagons. That's actually the way those kids are getting to school. Interesting way to go off to school, don't you think? On we go. In the winter, when the nights were long and the days short and the countryside covered with snow, she watched the children coasting and skating year followed year. The apple trees grew old and new ones were planted. The children grew up and went away to the city. And now at night, the lights of the city seemed brighter and closer. And then one day, the little house was surprised to see a horseless carriage coming down the winding country road. Okay, so a horseless carriage is exactly what that word describes it to be. There's no horse. Well, of course not. There's all kinds of cars. We don't even call them horseless carriages anymore. But in this particular book, that was a new thing to the little house, was that here come some horseless carriages, and these horseless carriages are actually very large. I'll keep going. A horseless carriage coming down the road, the winding country road. Pretty soon, there were more of them on the road and fewer carriages pulled by horses. Pretty soon along came some surveyors and surveyed a line in front of the little house. And pretty soon along came a steam shovel and dug a road through the hill covered with daisies. Then some trucks came and dumped big stones on the road. Then some trucks with little stones. And then some trucks with tar and sand. And finally, a steamroller came and rolled it all smooth, and the road was done. Now the little house watched the trucks and automobiles go back and forth in front of her hillside. Gasoline stations, roadside stands, and small houses followed the new road. Everyone and everything moved much faster than before. Another thing this author does, or the illustrator does, is shows what it's doing to the sky, to the air. More roads were made, and the countryside was divided into lots. More houses and bigger houses, apartment houses and tenement houses, schools, stores, and garages spread over the land and crowded around the little house. No one wanted to live in her anymore or take care of her anymore. She couldn't be sold for gold or silver. So she just stayed there and watched. And now it was not so quiet and peaceful at night. Now the lights of the city were bright and very close, and the street lights shone all night. This must be living in the city, thought the little house. And she didn't know whether she liked it or not. She missed the fields of daisies and the apple trees dancing in the moonlight. Pretty soon, there were trolley cars going back and forth in front of the little house. They went back and forth all day and part of the night. Everyone seemed to be very busy, and everyone seemed to be in such a hurry. So there's trolley cars riding on tracks. The line above there is part of the trolley car. Yeah, wouldn't you know it? Here comes the next thing. Pretty soon there was an elevated train going back and forth above the little house. The air was filled with dust and smoke, and the noise was so loud that it shook the little house. Now she couldn't tell when spring came, or summer, or fall, or winter. It all seemed pretty much the same. Pretty soon there was a subway going back and forth underneath the little house. There's an experience for you. If you have not ridden in a subway underneath the ground, she couldn't see it, but she could feel it and hear it. People were moving faster and faster. No one noticed the little house anymore. She hurried by. They all hurried by without a glance. She gets to be a little hard to see, so there she is, the little house. Pretty soon, they tore down the apartment houses and tenement houses around the little house. They started digging deep cellars, one on each side. The steam shovels dug down 3 stories on one side. You heard that right. They dug down 3 stories on one side. The steam shovel dug 3 stories on the other side. Pretty soon, they started building up. They built up 25 stories on one side and 35 stories on the other. Now the little house only saw the sun at noon and didn't see the moon or the stars at night at all, because the lights of the city were too bright. She didn't like living in the city. At night she used to dream of the country, and the field of daisies, and the apple trees dancing in the moonlight. The little house was sad and lonely. Her paint was cracked and dirty. Her windows were broken, and her shutters hung crookedly. She looked shabby, though she was still a good house. Then one fine morning in spring, along came the great-great-granddaughter of the man who had built the little house so well. They're right there. You want to see Orion? They're right there. She saw the shabby house, but she didn't hurry. There was something about the little house that made her stop and look again. She said to her husband, "That little house looks just like the little house my grandmother lived in when she was a little girl. Only that little house was way out in the country on a hill covered with daisies and apple trees growing around." They found out it was the same house. So they went to the movers to see if the little house could be moved. The movers looked the little house all over and said, "Sure, this house is as good as ever. She's built so well, we could move her anywhere." So they jacked up the little house and put her on wheels. Traffic was held up for hours as they slowly moved her out of the city. When I get to this page, I often wonder, could that really happen? Could you really have a house that you would jack up and move to anywhere you want to move it, which is what they said in the book? I believe that to be true. I believe that, yep, you could jack up a house, put it on a trailer, and move it. The other thing I wonder about is, could you stop all that traffic to get that house out of there? And again, I think that's true. I think that you could make that whole thing happen. At first the little house was frightened, but after she got used to it, she rather liked it. They rolled along the big road, and they rolled along the little roads, until they were way out in the country. When the little house saw the green grass and heard the birds singing, she didn't feel sad anymore. They went along and along, but they couldn't seem to find just the right place. They tried the little house here, and they tried the little house there. And finally they saw a little hill in the middle of a field, and apple trees growing around. "There," said the great-great-granddaughter, "that's just the place." "Yes, it is," said the little house to herself. A cellar was dug on top of the hill, and slowly they moved the house from the road to the hill. The windows and shutters were fixed, and once again they painted her a lovely shade of pink, and the little house settled down on her new foundation. She smiled happily. Once again she could watch the sun and moon and stars. Once again she could watch spring, summer, fall, and winter come and go. And once again she was lived in and taken care of. Never again would she be curious about the city. Never again would she want to live there. The stars twinkled above her. The new moon was coming up. It was spring, and all was quiet and peaceful in the country. Okay, like I promised, here's a second story, The Giving Tree. No animals in this one either, Orion. I suppose we could call this the Wednesday of No Animals. This one was by special request, and if you were to write in the chat box in any one of our streaming devices, you could ask for a particular book. Of course, we go looking for ones that cover science themes like urban sprawl. Once upon a time there was a tree. Well, I suppose you could say there's some science in here. This is about a tree. And she loved a little boy. You can just see the foot coming in there. There's the foot of the boy. Yeah, right there. There's the foot of the boy. He's coming into the picture. He's a little boy. And every day the boy would come. And he would gather her leaves. And make them into a crown and play king of the forest. He would climb up her trunk. Take a close look, because you can see the hands and the feet in that picture. And swing from her branches. And eat apples. Oh, now we know what kind of tree this is. Right? It's an apple tree? It must be an apple tree. And they would play hide and seek. And when he was tired, he would sleep in her shade. And the boy loved the tree. Very much. And the tree was happy. But time went by. Much bigger boy, isn't he? And the boy grew older. This one's from the Bemidji Library too, so I'll get this one back to the library, because then you can take a closer look at the pictures and you'll go, someone did a carving on the side of that tree. Wonder how the tree felt about that. And the boy grew older, and the tree was often alone. Then one day the boy came to the tree, and the tree said, "Come, boy, come and climb up my trunk and swing from my branches and eat apples and play in the shade and be happy." "I'm too big to climb and play," said the boy. "I want to buy things and have fun. I want some money. Can you give me some money?" "I'm sorry," said the tree, "but I have no money. I only have leaves and apples." "Take my apples, boy, and sell them in the city. Then you will have money, and you will be happy." And the boy climbed up the tree and gathered her apples and carried them away. And the tree was happy. The boy stayed away a long time, and the tree was sad. And then one day the boy came back, and the tree shook with joy. She said, "Come, boy, climb up my trunk and swing from my branches and be happy." Take a look at the boy. "I am too busy to climb trees," said the boy. "I want a house to keep me warm," he said. "I want a wife and I want children, so I need a house. Can you give me a house?" "I have no house," said the tree. "The forest is my house. But you may cut off my branches and build a house. That'll make you happy." And so the boy cut off her branches and carried them away to build his house. And the tree was happy. But the boy stayed away a long time. And when he came back, the tree was so happy she could hardly speak. "Come, boy," she whispered. "Come and play." "I am too old and sad to play," said the boy. "I want a boat that will take me far away from here. Can you give me a boat?" "Cut down my trunk and make a boat," said the tree. "And then you can sail away, and then you'll be happy." And so the boy cut down her trunk, and he made a boat, and he sailed away. And the tree was happy. But not really. But not really. And after a long time, the boy came back again. "I'm so sorry, boy," said the tree, "but I have nothing left to give you. My apples are gone." My teeth are too weak for apples," said the boy. "My branches are gone," said the tree. "You cannot swing on them." "I'm too old to swing on branches," said the boy. "My trunk is gone," said the tree. "You cannot climb." "I am too tired to climb," said the boy. "I'm sorry," sighed the tree. "I wish that I could give you something. I have nothing left. I am just an old stump. I am sorry." "I don't need very much now," said the boy. "Just a quiet place to sit and rest. I'm very tired." "Well," said the tree, straightening herself up as much as she could. "Well, an old stump is good for sitting and resting. Come, boy, sit down and rest." And so the boy did. And the tree was happy. The end. Thanks for the person that wrote that in. Appreciate your request for a particular book. Hey, that's it for us today on Wednesday. And Orion's going to say goodbye as well. We'll see ya. We do this every single day at 3:30. So we'll be back doing this tomorrow and Friday and so on and so on and so forth. We are currently closed on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays, but we are open on Friday, Saturday, Sundays, and Mondays. So we'll see you.